Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I've got a dozen topics for you, and all the URLs are in the description of this video for your convenience. The first one we have here is off of Liberty Writers, and it says, Breaking! Kim Jong-un just gave himself a death wish. This is not good. And once the hamster gets with the program here and we can get it scrolled down, I'll tell you what this article has to say. Here we go. North Korea just threatened to sink a U.S. carrier in order to show how strong its military is. Two Japanese ships joined a U.S. strike group in the Philippine Sea. Missionary forces are combat ready to sink a U.S. nuclear-powered aircraft carrier with a single strike, according to North Korea's ruling Workers' Party newspaper. The paper then called the USS Carl Vinson a gross animal and said that striking the carrier would be an actual example to show our military's force. He said North Korea has to conform. And there's some video in this if you want to pull it up and watch that. It says, according to Fox News, analysts think that North Korea is gearing up for a sixth nuclear test. North Korea is working to make nuclear-tipped missiles that'll reach the U.S. coastline. And then it says, let's give Trump a giant thank you for protecting us and share this if you are glad Trump is our president. The next article, this is off of the dailymail.co.uk. And the hamster is running as fast as he can go. Come on, hamster. Here we go. Trump sends cruise missile carrying nuclear submarine to South Korean port as he warns Kim Jong-un is a problem that needs to be finally solved. The USS Michigan arrived on Monday ahead of a possible Tuesday nuke trial. Tuesday is the 85th anniversary of the start of North Korean People's Army. The U.S., Japan, and South Korea are meeting in Tokyo to discuss North Korea. Trump has also invited the entire Senate to the White House on Wednesday, and the UN Security Council on North Korea will also meet on Friday. Japan and China are to meet too. China is an unhappy ally of the hermit state. North Korea has refused to stop its nuclear tests and is threatening more trials. The USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier strike group is also heading to the peninsula. A nuclear-powered U.S. submarine arrived in a South Korean port on Tuesday in a show of force amid concerns that North Korea may attempt another missile launch or nuclear test on Tuesday. The port call in Busan by the USS Michigan came as an American aircraft carrier strike group continued steaming towards Korean waters. And as tensions in the area continued to rise, the top nuclear envoys from South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. met in Tokyo to discuss North Korea's refusal to give up its nuclear program. And there's some pictures and some video in this. It says on Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump called for tougher new UN sanctions on Pyongyang, saying the North was a global threat and a problem that we have to finally solve. The USS Michigan's armament comprises 4 torpedo tubes and 154 BMG-109 Tomahawks. It was modified to remove its nuclear armaments in the mid-2000s. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga told a media briefing that China's nuclear envoy Wu Dui would also hold talks with Japanese foreign ministry officials on Tuesday. A ministry source said Wu was likely to meet his Japanese nuclear counterpart on Wednesday. Matching the flurry of activity in North Asia, the State Department in Washington said on Monday U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson would chair a special ministerial meeting of the UN Security Council on North Korea on Friday. Tillerson, along with Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats, and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Joseph Dunford, would also hold rare briefing for the entire U.S. Senate on North Korea on Wednesday, Senate aides said. The status quo in North Korea is also unacceptable, Trump told a meeting with the 15 UN Security Council ambassadors, including China and Russia, at the White House. The council must be prepared to impose additional and stronger sanctions on North Korean nuclear and ballistic missile programs. South Korea and U.S. officials have feared for some time that a sixth North Korean nuclear test could be imminent. Speculation has grown that such a test or another long-range missile launch could coincide with the 85th anniversary of the foundation of the North Korean People's Army on Tuesday. The official China Daily said on Tuesday it was time for Pyongyang and Washington to take a step back from harsh rhetoric and heed the voices of reason, calling for a peaceful resolution. Judging from their recent words and deeds, policymakers in Pyongyang have seriously misread the UN sanctions, which are aimed at its nuclear missile provocations, not its system or leadership, the newspaper said in an editorial. They are at once perilously overestimating their own strength and underestimating the hazards they are brewing for themselves, it said. In a phone conversation with Trump on Monday, Chinese President Xi Jinping called for all sides to exercise restraint. Two Japanese destroyers conducted exercises on Monday with the USS Carl Vinson aircraft carrier strike group that is headed for waters off the Korean peninsula, sent by Trump as a warning to the North. The South Korean military is also planning to conduct joint drills with the carrier group. As those drills continue, the USS Michigan arrived in the South Korean port of Busan on Tuesday. The U.S. Navy said the nuclear-powered submarine is built to carry and launch ballistic missiles and Tomahawk cruise missiles. As well as his military show of force, Trump has also sought to pressure China to do more than rein in its nuclear-armed neighbor. China, North Korea's sole major ally, has in turn been angered by Pyongyang's belligerence as well as its nuclear and missile programs. Regardless, North Korea carried out nuclear and missile tests in defiance of successive rounds of United Nations sanctions. Angered by the approach of the carrier group, which could arrive within days, North Korea said the deployment of the USS Carl Vinson was an extremely dangerous act by those who plan a nuclear war to invade. The United States should not run amok and should consider carefully any catastrophic consequences from its foolish military provocative act, Rodong Sinmun, the official newspaper of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party, said in a commentary. The next article, since the hamster decides to cooperate. There we go. Nationalinterest.org says Chinese media, North Korea will cross the point of no return with 6th nuclear test. North Korea is nearing the point of no return as the reclusive regime prepares for a possible 6th nuclear test, Chinese media reports. The game of chicken between Washington and Pyongyang has come to a breaking point, the Global Times, a national Chinese newspaper managed by state-run People's Daily writes. If North Korea carries out a 6th nuclear test as expected, it is more likely than ever that the situation will cross the point of no return. All stakeholders will bear the consequences, with Pyongyang sure to suffer the greatest losses, the outlet warns. first appeared in the Daily Caller Foundation website, and there is a link to that if you want to pull that up to see that. The Global Times, while sometimes used to test reactions to potential foreign policies, does not necessarily represent the views of state, but the warnings appear consistent with Beijing's recent actions. Chinese media has issued several warnings to Pyongyang lately in an attempt to prevent a nuclear test and a crisis on the Korean Peninsula. The North Korean nuclear issue is like a puzzle filled with bombs, the paper explains. Once the U.S. launches surgical strikes against North Korea's nuclear and missile facilities, the Pyongyang regime will be forced to make life or death decision. The Global Times argues that there is no future for the North Korean regime if it continues on its present course. China is caught between a rock and a hard place between Washington and Pyongyang. Washington hopes that Beijing can contain Pyongyang from conducting its nuclear activities, as if such an effort is as easy as saying abracadabra. Chinese media accurately notes North Korea, on the other hand, hopes China will pile more pressure on the U.S. and South Korea to stop their threats of war. Beijing cannot possibly satisfy both sides. President Donald Trump has said that he is eager to see China rein in North Korea, but has also stated that the U.S. will take matters into its own hands if China does not come through. If you see Kim Jong-un attack a military base, if you see some sort of intercontinental ballistic missile, then obviously we're going to respond with force, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley said on Monday with NBC's Today Show. Replying to questions of how the U.S. might respond if North Korea tested a nuclear weapon or an ICBM, Haley said, "I think then the president steps in and decides what's going to happen." The Trump administration has been working with allies and partners, including China, to rein in North Korea. At the same time, U.S. has been moving strategic assets, nuclear submarines, and aircraft carriers into the region. The administration has repeatedly stated that while it hopes to resolve this issue peacefully, all options are on the table. North Korea's weapons program is advancing in an accelerated pace. The North has tested two ballistic missiles, the KN-15 mid-range missile and the KN-17 anti-ship ballistic missile this year. North Korea has also tested high-thrust rocket engines for potential ICBM, which Pyongyang claimed it was close to testing in January. Additionally, regular activities around the Punggye-ri nuclear test site has the observers concerned that the North may soon conduct a sixth nuclear weapons test. Defense experts estimate that the North is capable of producing a nuclear bomb every 6 or 7 weeks, reports the New York Times. Experimenting with higher explosives yields improved warheads and missiles with greater ranges. The North is steadily raising the threat to its neighbors and eventually the U.S. The most immediate challenge is the situation on the Korean Peninsula. Kim Jong-un's regime has thrown its full weight behind its quest for nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them. And unfortunately, the regime is making real progress. GOP Arizona Senator John McCain explained Tuesday at a hearing on U.S. policy and strategy in the Asia Pacific. A North Korean missile with nuclear payload capable of striking an American city is no longer a distant hypothetical, but an imminent danger, one that poses a real and rising risk of conflict. The situation on the peninsula is rapidly accelerating. And there is another page to this, so let's page to that. And the hamster's running in the wheel. And here it comes. As Trump calls North Korea a real threat to the world. and an urgent security challenge. The administration is determined to resolve the crisis on the peninsula one way or another, and the sixth nuclear test might push the president to call for a solution through the use of military force. It is unclear if either side will, as the Global Times puts it, roll the dice in this crazy gamble. The end of the article right there. So there you have that. The next one is off of Conservative Tribune. Prime Minister is a big fan of nuclear first strike. If the action is warranted, UK Prime Minister Theresa May is prepared to use nuclear weapons in a first strike attack, Newsmax reported. Secretary Michael Fallon issued a dire warning to Britain's enemies on the Today program on BBC Radio 4. You can listen to it in a link here in this if you wish to pull that up. He didn't specify what would warrant a nuclear strike. He rightly told the listening audience that the nuclear weapons don't serve as very good deterrence. If the enemy knows exactly what to avoid, that would defeat the whole purpose. In the most extreme circumstances, we've made it very clear that you can't rule out the use of nuclear weapons as a first strike, Fallon said when asked what circumstances would warrant the use of nuclear weapons by the United Kingdom. He explained that specifically the circumstances that would warrant a first strike would be a grave mistake. They are better not, or try this again. Now that's what it says. They are better not specified or described, which would only give comfort to our enemies and make the deterrent less credible, he said. The whole point about the deterrent is you've got to leave uncertainty in the mind of anybody who might be thinking of using weapons against this country. And get the hamster to bring her on up. Says we use the deterrent every single day. That's what it does. It deters day and night. Every single day, every single year. We have nuclear submarines out there as our deterrent, as our protection. Amen. Now, try this again. Now, do we hope that Great Britain or anyone else makes use of their nuclear arsenal? Absolutely not. However, the entire point of having one is to prevent hostile governments and organizations from embarking on a nuclear exchange with us. It's important that those hostile governments know the United Kingdom isn't playing around. The next article is off of Western Journalism. Former CIA director says Russia is by far the weaker power. As tensions between the U.S. and Russia continue to escalate, former CIA National Security Director Michael Hayden says Russia has a lot more to lose if a conflict were to break out. No one wants to go to war with the Russians, but let me double down on another concept. The Russians really don't want to go to war with us, Hayden, who served under President George W. Bush, said Wednesday on CNN. Out front, CNN put out a tweet that says, General M. Hayden, no one wants to go to war with Russians, but the Russians really don't want to go to war with us. They are by far the weaker power, the retired Air Force General said of Russia. Hayden was highly critical of Russia for its decision to fly long-range bombers off the coast of Alaska twice this week in a period of 24 hours. He called the move a little pathetic, but contended that it provided a great opportunity for training our Alaskan Air Forces. Tensions between the U.S. and Russia have been escalating after President Donald Trump's decision to order missile strikes against a Syrian airbase suspected of carrying out a chemical weapons attack earlier in April. Russia, which has been a staunch supporter of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, for the missile strike. Following the missile strike, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said that the U.S.-Russia relations reached a low point after a very frank meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Hayden praised Trump's decision to launch the strike against the Syrian airbase. He also offered his take on Trump's recent actions against North Korea, arguing that the aggressive messaging by the administration is most intended not for the North Koreans, it's intended for the Chinese, and we want to influence them to keep the pressure up on the North. Expressed concern that Trump's administration was stirring the pot a little bit too vigorously in the Korean Peninsula. He said that allowing North Korea to continue to develop nuclear weapons would be a dangerous path to take. The North Koreans are going to be able to strike Seattle here in 4 or 5 years with a nuclear weapon if things don't change, Hayden warned. The next article is off of the DC Daily Caller. It says here, Muslim man who brandished gun at Christian conference charged with making terrorist threats. And I have mentioned this article a couple of times in the last week about this, and this is a follow-up to it. It says the Muslim man who brandished pistols tongue-tied. The Muslim man who brandished pistols, assault-style weapons, and ammunition outside a Sioux Falls, South Dakota Christian conference earlier this month was charged Friday with making terrorist threats, the Associated Press reports. The man's name is Ihab Jabbar. Last week, a police spokesman told the Daily Caller that Jabbar had not broken any laws. Be scared, be effing terrified, he said in the video as he revealed pistols, rifles, and ammunition he was carrying in his van. South Dakota allows open carry, and Jabbar also has a concealed carry permit. So his possession of weapons was not by itself illegal. Sioux Falls Police Officer Sam Clemens stated that everything he was doing was legal. He didn't break any laws, so we didn't charge him. However, Attorney General Marty Jackley and Lincoln County State's Attorney Tom Woolman subsequently reviewed Jabbar's videos. According to the Argus Leader, Jackley stated he believed that Jabbar's comments violated state law, which prohibits threats to commit a crime of violence with the intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. Search of Jabbar's home found methamphetamine in addition to weapons. He claims that he was not threatening anyone. Jabbar described himself as an ardent supporter of the Second Amendment rights. You know what the sad thing is? I'm a Republican, he told ABC's KSFY. I'm a Republican for one reason, the Second Amendment. This felony charge could result in Jabbar losing his rights. A conviction carries a penalty of up to 5 years in prison and or fines of up to $10,000. Conference organizer Brandon Howes told the DC that while he was glad Jabbar was arrested, he fumed that it took the police 12 days to do so. My blood ran cold when I found this out. Meth? You mean we could have a guy jacked up on drugs combined with his ideology, putting 500 men, women, and children at risk at our Christian conference? Why was he not arrested that night or even questioned? How did he stay on the streets for 12 days with guns and meth? Jackley said that public pressure did not have a role in their decision to finally press the case, adding, if anything, the public pressure can create more challenges for an investigation. It doesn't play any role in our investigation or our decisions. Howes was skeptical. What would have happened if the shoe were on the other foot, he asked. If that had been a conservative brandishing a weapon in front of an Islamic conference, or indeed practically anywhere, he would have been thrown in jail immediately and all his firearms confiscated, no questions asked. And the media would have had a field day talking about conservative domestic terrorists. But here we have the media bending over backwards to help Jabbar make his case, quoting him as just a Republican exercising his Second Amendment rights. Since when does the media defend someone who believes the Second Amendment? What a joke. House told the DC that as a direct result of Jabbar's videos, even event hosts at subsequent conferences require him to carry or to hire extra security, costing thousands more dollars for these free to the public events. Next article is off of Breitbart. Illegal immigrant driver intentionally killed bicyclist, police say. An illegal immigrant in a small North Carolina town intentionally hit and killed a bicyclist with his car, according to police. Gennaro Menez Padilla, an 18-year-old illegal immigrant, allegedly struck 42-year-old Jamaica Williams with his vehicle after the two were involved in a previous altercation, according to the Johnson County report. According to eyewitness reports, Menez Padilla was upset with Williams after he allegedly made a comment to a woman living nearby. Williams took off on his bike shortly thereafter. Menez Padilla was allegedly angered by the comment and followed Williams and confronted him. Eventually, police say Menez Padilla got into his car and intentionally struck Williams. First responders came to the scene and took Williams to a nearby hospital, where he later died of his injuries. Williams had just recently moved back to the small town of Kenley to be closer with his family and was recently hired for a new job. Immigration and Customs Enforcement confirmed to Breitbart, Texas, that Menez Padilla was in the U.S. illegally, and the agency currently has a detainer on him, where he may be deported if released from prison for any reason. Menez Padilla is being charged with second-degree murder. Next article's off Breitbart. It says, measles outbreak in Minnesota, Somali community. And scroll this down a little bit here. A recent outbreak of measles is the latest public health problem among Somalis who live in metropolitan Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, home to the largest Somali community in the country. Measles now joins active tuberculosis as a public health problem within Minnesota's Somali community. During the 5 years between 2010 and 2014, 732 cases of active TB were diagnosed in Minnesota. Of these, 81%, or 593, were foreign-born. Of foreign-born cases, 50%, or 296, were refugees, according to the Epidemiology of Tuberculosis in Minnesota 2010 through 2014, a report published by the Minnesota Department of Health. Breitbart News noted in October. 29% of the 593 foreign-born cases of active TB diagnosed in Minnesota between 2012 and 2015, or 161, were attributed to Somali-born immigrants. Almost all Somali immigrants to the United States have arrived under the Federal Refugee Resettlement Program, Breitbart News reported at the time. The Hennepin County measles outbreak grew to 20 cases Monday after 8 new infections were confirmed. State health officials said all the cases have occurred within the Somali American community, and they urged parents to get the measles vaccine for themselves and their children if they are unvaccinated, the Star Tribune reported last week. The outbreak is expected to produce many more cases and could exceed the 2011 outbreak of 26 cases, according to Chris Earsman, infectious disease director at the Minnesota Health Department. So far, all of those who have caught the measles in this outbreak are 5 years old or younger. Exposure has occurred at several daycare centers. Since the first case was detected 2 weeks ago, health investigators have been trying to identify anyone unvaccinated exposed to the virus, which is highly contagious. It can take up to 3 weeks for measles symptoms to develop. The health department recommended Monday that the schedule for a second dose be accelerated for any Somali American children who have received the initial shot, which they said is common practice during outbreaks, the Star Tribune reported. The 8 new infections in this outbreak include, for the first time, at least one baby under 12 months, an age group that has been of concern to public health officials because they typically lack immunity protection. Investigators have examined the vaccination records of 16 of those infected, and none of them had received the MMR shot. Records for the other 4 are still being collected. Measles symptoms include coughing, sore throat, fever, and blotchy skin rash. It can lead to pneumonia or encephalitis or swelling of the brain, and in some cases is fatal. According to a health department official, Minnesota's Somali immigrant community has been a particular target of the anti-vaccination movement, uh, colloquially known as the anti-vaxxers, Mick.com reported last week. They're very much engaged with and targeting this community. Chris Earsman, Infectious Disease Division Director at the Minnesota Health Department, said in a phone call on Wednesday. According to Earsman, anti-vaccine groups began to target the Somali community around 2008 amid concerns about autism among Somali American children. Anti-vaccine groups started reaching out to Somali community and showing up at community health meetings, she said, disseminating misinformation linking autism to the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, or MMR. Since then, the population has seen a steady decline in MMR vaccine rates. At least one high-profile figure in the anti-vaccine movement has made special trips just to speak to Somali immigrants. In 2011, Andrew Wakefield, a man who has been called the father of the anti-vaccine movement, showed up in Minnesota in the midst of what was then the state's first major measles outbreak in years, the Star Tribune reported at the time. Earsman said that wasn't Wakefield's first trip to speak to Somali families in Minnesota. She believes he visited once before in 2008 when anti-vaxxers were first arriving to spread misinformation. Wakefield, the now disgraced British doctor who published a widely shared and subsequently discredited paper implying a link between vaccines and autism, traveled to Minneapolis to hold a private forum for Somali immigrants. The meeting was described at the time as a support group for families of autistic children, the Star Tribune reported. Hennepin County is also the site of 2 recent cases of active tuberculosis at local public high schools, as Breitbart News reported in February. Another case of active tuberculosis has been diagnosed in Hennepin County, Minnesota public schools, local officials confirmed on Wednesday. The new case has been diagnosed in a person at Central Middle School in Eden Prairie, KARE-TV reports. This marks the second time in 2 months Hennepin County Department of Health officials have confirmed that a person at a public school in the county has been diagnosed with active TB. In January, Hennepin County Public Health Department officials reported that a person in St. Louis Park High School had been diagnosed with active TB. The letter to the parents from St. Louis Park Public Schools informing them of the case of active TB in January was sent in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Somali, Breitbart News reported. The next article is off Liberty Writers. It says, thank God, after so many attacks on Trump, he just hired a Marine for the ultimate job. President Donald Trump has had a lot of nut jobs threatening his life ever since he took office. There have been people jumping the White House fence, driving cars into it, stealing guns to attack him, and many other bad things. Sadly, the Secret Service has not been doing their job very well, and that's why Trump did the only sensible thing, call in the Marines. According to Politico, Trump is about to hire a retired Marine Major General Randolph Ailes to take over the Secret Service. Ailes is extremely qualified for the job. Besides serving 35 years in the U.S. Marines, he currently works as acting deputy commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Major General Ailes will be replacing Joe Clancy, Obama's pick to head the Secret Service, who has done an absolutely horrible job his entire time in office. Just last month, under Clancy's watch, one attacker jumped the White House fence and ran around for 17 minutes before the Secret Service caught him. That's so bad. I think an accomplished Marine like Randolph Ailes is a great pick for the job. The number one concern here is the safety of the president, so whoever can do it is the one we need. If you think Trump is smart to surround himself with Marines, then share this with your family and friends and let them know. God bless President Donald Trump and his entire family. The next article, this is off Fellowship of the Minds, and it says, after losing 2016 election, Democrats are defecting to Communist Party USA. Why can't I say that I didn't see this coming? People's World, the bilingual news site of the Communist Party USA, or the CPUSA, reports on April 19th of 2017 that CPUSA has been receiving membership requests ever since Donald Trump was elected president. Emily Shepers, CPUSA's international secretary and an anthropologist by profession who was born in South Africa, told the Grandma International that although the phantom of the McCarthy era still looms across the U.S., there is growing interest in communist ideas. The global financial crisis affected many people and left the sense that today's youth are worse off than their parents. Neither recent Democrat or Republican administrations have been able to resolve the serious problems affecting the majority of the country's citizens. Although the United States is in no way experiencing a pre-revolutionary situation in the communist sense, capitalism is showing terminal signs worldwide. What Shepard neglected to say is that Marxist intellectuals have been insisting that capitalism is showing terminal signs worldwide for more than a century. But now, to explain the 2016 U.S. election that voted uber-capitalist Donald Trump as president, Shepard attributes that to an ideological manipulation that unleashed a right-wing upsurge because popular discontent doesn't always take a progressive route. Even in his current home state of Virginia, not only the wealthy but also many poor whites with false class consciousness voted for Trump. Shepard blames Americans' false class consciousness on the corporate mass media and local news stations in the interior of the country that only broadcast preachers announcing the end of the world. Shepard is convincing that if Bernie Sanders had been Trump's opponent, Sanders would have won. The same avowed socialist Sanders, who is a millionaire with 3 homes, including a $600,000 lakefront estate purchased just 5 days after the 2016 Democratic National Convention that scheduled Hillary Clinton as the party's presidential candidate. Shepard admits that the great challenge for CPUSA continues to be organizing American workers and trade unions. CPUSA stopped offering its own candidates in U.S. presidential elections years ago. Instead, CPUSA has endorsed Democratic Party presidential candidates in every election since 1988, beginning with Michael Dukakis to Hillary Clinton in 2016. The CPUSA opposes U.S. militarism and supports the Palestinian cause, the Cuban Revolution, and more recently the tongue-tied, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, the same corrupt regime that mismanaged and destroyed the Venezuelan economy and encourages and ignores and suppresses tens of thousands of Venezuelans who protest and march against the government. Way to go, CPUSA. Unlike Emily Shepers, the Democrats who have gone over to the Communist Party USA at least are honest, as the Democrat Party long ago had morphed into the Communist Party in all but name. And then they have some links that you can go to read more on this if you're interested in that. The next one we have is off of Breitbart, and it says Donald Trump announces 20% import tax on Canadian softwood lumber. President Donald Trump announced that he wanted a 20% tax on softwood lumber coming from Canada, telling a conservative media that he thought the country was treating Canada very unfairly. We're going to be putting a 20% tax on softwood lumber coming in, tariff on softwood coming into the United States from Canada, Trump announced during a meeting with conservative journalists. He also signaled he wanted action on Canadian dairy products as well. We're going to start doing lumber in our country. It's going to mean that farmers are going to start selling milk in our country, Trump said. The president's decision is the latest sign that he will keep his promises on trade deal negotiations. A senior administration trade official said that the issue was a long simmering problem with Canada, pointing out that they get cheap lumber from federally owned timber and sell it at subsidized rates. We love Canada, wonderful people, wonderful country, but they have been very good about taking advantage of us through NAFTA, Trump said. Trump said that he would explore allowing more logging on federal lands with the Department of the Interior and the Environmental Protection Agency. We're actually having some of those horrific fires because this stuff is sitting there, virgin stuff, for so long, and it's in very bad shape, he said. The final article I have for you today is off of Liberty Headlines, and it says Trump targets Obama and Clinton-era land grabs. President Donald Trump will sign an executive order Wednesday reviewing decades worth of national monument designations made during Democratic administration. Trump's order will direct the Interior Department to review former President Barack Obama's Bears Ears Monument designation, as well as the Clinton-era Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, both of which are in Utah. The Trump administration wants to determine whether the Antiquities Act has been abused by his predecessors, a White House official told reporters on Monday. Former President Theodore Roosevelt signed the Antiquities Act in 1906 to protect federal lands and waterways. Past administrations have overused this power and designated large swaths of land well beyond the areas in need of protection, the official said. The Antiquities Act executive order directs the Department of the Interior to review prior monument designations and suggest legislative changes or modifications to the monument proclamations. Obama set aside 1.5 million acres of land in December to create Bears Ears Monument, which has been opposed by some local Navajo tribal members despite being supported by tribal officials. The monument added to the 265 million acres the former president set aside during his 2 terms. Republicans are praising Trump's anticipated executive order, with some calling the memo a vital tool to help right the wrongs committed by previous administrations. In President Trump, we have a leader who is committed to defending the Western way of life. I am deeply grateful for his willingness to work with us to undo the harm caused by the overreach of his predecessors, Republican Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah said in a statement. Various American Indian tribes haggled over Obama's Bears Ears designation, namely because they fear it could potentially harm tribal members' ability to forage herbs or collect firewood. Navajo Nation leadership supports the monument, but 2 subgroups who live closest to the monument, the Anith chapter and the Blue Mountain Dene, oppose it. Blue Mountain Dene are not an officially recognized Navajo chapter. Trump's executive order could lead to a shrinking of some monuments' boundaries rather than merely abolishing them, according to individuals briefed on the proposal. Shrinking the boundaries would be easier pull, they argue, because the government in 1938 determined that the Antiquities Act gave the president the authority to designate, not abolish, monuments. Hatch appeared to hedge on the issue slightly. He said on the Senate floor Monday that designating monuments is an important part of preserving federal lands, but the process must be reined in somewhat. Now, Mr. President, I wish to be clear. In opposing the Bears Ears Monument designation, I am in no way opposing the protection of lands that need to be protected. Instead, there are many cultural sites in San Juan County that deserve special care, and I am committed to working with the President and the Congress to preserve these sacred sites, he said. The federal government owns 85% of Nevada, 52% of Oregon, 45% of California, 69% of Alaska, and 57% of Utah. Bureau of Land Management, BLM, controls a vast swath of land west of Missouri. The government's ownership of this land has caused tensions in states like Utah and Nevada that are forced to wrangle with strict environmental regulations limiting energy development. And that's all I have for you today. If you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up, share it on your social media so everybody gets to hear the news, and don't forget to subscribe. That way you'll stay informed. Have a great day.